Hey, it's Mike here, and today my response to all caps proof that plants and veganism is not a human diet by Dr. Robert Cywes, the hashtag carb addiction doc. I think we know how he feels about carbs.
This bullshit by the vegans and the vegetarians that their diet is healthy is absolute hogwash.
Not only did you guys request a response, but the video has also gotten up to about 350,000 views, and people are buying it from the comments. It's like, yeah, you're absolutely right. And by it, I mean a ton of claims that are lacking science behind them about how we just couldn't eat wild plant foods, like they were all poisonous and gonna kill us. And some ignorant claims about what indigenous North Americans ate, as well as just some wild takes on human prehistory and what we ate. And I haven't covered that in a while, so much so that there's been new research that we're gonna cover on that topic. And I don't think he cites a single study in the actual video. So we got a lot to talk about. Let's just go. Dr. Rob Cywes is a South African doctor who creates a bunch of, low carb, keto slanted videos that are, of course, anti-carb. And we probably both agree that refined sugar is not healthy, but I just need to quickly remind people that whole carbs and whole fruits are over and over again associated with lower mortality. And let's just see what he has to say. This is essentially his thesis statement here.
How is it possible for a vegan to justify, or even a vegetarian to justify their food selection when it is an anti-human diet in that those plants never existed before?
Don't worry, we'll respond to that whole notion in detail, but let's just go back to sort of the beginning of the video. Here he is showing what kind of company he keeps.
And I heard the other day a video of my friend Ken Berry going ballistic about vegans, and I love Ken. He's just brilliant.
Yeah, Dr. Ken Berry, major red flag. I did a whole response video to him. He's the kind of guy that has nightmares about steamed broccoli. And this comment shows the damage they're collectively doing. Quote, Dr. Berry made me unsure about eating healthy veggies. You just cleared it up for me forever. Definitely radicalizing people to a crazy diet. And when you're making a pseudoscientific claim, a lot of times it helps to start out with something that is known and is scientifically valid. Here's his starting point.
Most plants hate us. Most plants in the wild type are poisonous to human beings. That is an absolute fact.
I think New Scientist has a good quote that can respond to this. Quote, of Earth's estimated 400,000 plant species, we could eat some 300,000 armed with the right imagination, boldness, and preparation. Yeah, with cooking, soaking, and fermenting, we're able to eat so many of these foods that you can't just eat right off the plant because we have adapted. And I will say, this just brings me right back to Dr. Anthony Chaffee, another one of those carnivore people who claims, oh, plants are trying to kill us. That was his presentation that I responded to in a whole video touching on a lot of this. And one of my main points about that is the way that plants are trying to kill their predators oftentimes means antioxidants that extend our life. From this meta-analysis, blood levels of various plant antioxidants are wildly associated with lower mortality. For example, higher carotenoids in the blood associated with 40% lower all-cause mortality.
But what they do want us sometimes to eat is to eat their seeds so that we can transport their seeds in our gut and poop them out.
Yeah, some plants want us to eat them. That's not really helping your argument there.
If we go back and we look at the plants that everybody on the internet and all our doctors and all the famous people are telling us we must eat and a plant-based diet is so good for us, none of those plants existed.
To boil his logic down, yes, boiling is another way that plants can become safe to eat in many cases. To boil his logic down, this really is an appeal to history / appeal to nature fallacy. He's saying that if we didn't eat it 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, then it can't be good for us. Well, that same logic can be applied to, say, surgery with stainless steel. Clearly, we shouldn't be using stainless steel for surgery because we didn't in the past, therefore it must be bad for us. Let's just go back to using some, unsanitized bone shards to cut into people. And he's really promoting the alternative, of course, eating animal products directly, eating animal flesh, yet a lot of these animals have been bred to have a completely different body composition than they do normally or naturally. And a lot of that is just done with feed, how much we feed them. Some of it is breeding. He does mention that way later in the video, but he's like, oh, it really isn't enough of a change to make a difference.
No question, a hog is different than a wild boar, but not that much different. Cows are a little bit different than bison, but not that much different.
But as we know, that increased saturated fat raises LDL, which is causally linked to atherosclerosis.
Cultivated a very, very small fraction of those plants, and we've selectively bred them over 4,000 to 5,000 of years, and they have a higher carbohydrate content.
Yeah, they do have a higher carbohydrate content. I guess he's saying that's bad because he's anti-carbs, but again, whole carbs healthy, and this has just increased the calorie content and the efficiency of our food production system, which has allowed for a larger population, which most people would say is a success in terms of a food. Obviously, there are downsides to too many people, but civilizations that relied like entirely on animals, like the Inuit, virtually relying on animal fat and animal products, weren't able to increase their population, which shows an inefficiency to support a population with animal foods like that. And it's also ridiculous to say that foods that we didn't domesticate are unhealthy. A lot of times they are healthier. For example, in my oatmeal today, I added wild blueberries because they have a higher antioxidant content, which buffers oxidative stress, which is, implied in virtually every major disease. Yeah, and the idea that we didn't eat plants before domestication is just ignoring like all of the fossil record and so much. For example, we can find fossilized poops, and those indicate that our ancestors were eating about 100 grams of fiber per day, which is like 5 times or more as much as the average American.
Prior to Christopher Columbus, potatoes didn't exist in Ireland. How did they get so attached to them? And what did they eat before that? What did the Irish eat prior to 1492? All these plants didn't exist before.
He gets into what foods didn't exist in Europe, and because they didn't exist in Europe, he implies, I guess, that they're not healthy for European people. He mentions the potato, which is from South America, and fine, you're scared that if a food wasn't in your heritage, it might have a negative effect. So we could look at the science on various foods and their health effects. Another one he mentions later is the tomato. Oh my God, these are all super dangerous nightshades.
The tomatoes, originally in the wild form, came from a member of the deadly nightshade family and was once believed to be poisonous.
Well, tomato protects us from the UV, has antioxidants, which are great for us, especially for prostate cancer, lowers prostate cancer risk, and just helps health in general. And tomatoes were associated with lower mortality in people of mostly European descent in the US. And just because we didn't have potatoes doesn't mean there weren't plant foods. People in Europe were eating plants and staples like barley. And we can go back further to the Mesolithic era, which was before agriculture. This is a study on staple carb crops back then. They found that some of these wild root/rhizomes can be higher in carb and energy content than cultivated potatoes, showing that they could have, quote, provided a major carbohydrate and energy source for hunter-gatherers in Europe. And for a 2023 study that adds to that evidence, it found, again, Mesolithic era charred starchy tuber remains in Europe. It also references how over 90 edible roots and tubers are native to Europe that hunter-gatherers had access to, and that in particular 28 hunter-gatherer sites across Europe have found plant remains in Mesolithic times, mainly roots and tubers. And they also make a good point that roots and tubers are collectively moisture-rich and fragile and are likely to be underrepresented in the archaeological record, which is why we're just finding this stuff out now. And this video is sponsored by Seeds DS01 Daily Synbiotic, which is a probiotic and a prebiotic. And one of these little guys has 53.6 billion active bacterial cell units from 24 different strains, which are scientifically shown to support various areas of health, from digestive health, gut immunity, cardiovascular health, skin health, and more. And again, I want to talk about the immune system because, like last time, so many people I know are still sick from whatever seasonal situations are happening in terms of the flu and cold this year. The gut and the immune system are very connected. In fact, from this paper, 70 to 80% of our immune cells are in our gut. And just to put this into context, there are studies that show how big the probiotic connection is here. From this 2013 study on college students who were just healthy young people, one group got probiotics and one didn't, and looking at respiratory tract infection severity, the probiotic group had about 1/3 less symptom severity, which is amazing. And Lindy and I have been taking Seed since 2021. Lindy especially has benefited from them, so I'm all about Seed and its benefits. And of course, if you would like to try it, you can click the link below and use the code MIC25, that's MIC25, for 25% off your first month's supply. All right.
And when you get in your spaceship and come back here in 100,000 years' time, maybe then we'll eat some plants.
100,000 years in the future. Oh my gosh, landing back on Earth, I see no humans. Where have they all gone? I only see this one video that was left by humanity. Beep.
This is a dire warning. We all listened to Dr. Robert Cywes and decided to give up plants and eat only meat. And instead of using the 30% of ice-free land that we were using, we pushed that to 100%. And due to the feed conversion ratio for beef of 10 units of plants to 1 unit of beef, those of us who didn't die of heart disease starved, and the rest died of climate catastrophe due to ridiculous cow burp methane emissions. Don't make the same mistake we did. I'm dying. Last human alive.
I heard an endocrinologist the other day throw the blue zone diet at me, and these people are so healthy and they don't have heart disease because they eat blue zone food and it's all vegan. You go to those blue zone territories, the food that they're currently eating did not exist 500, 1,000 years ago in that specific area.
Now he's just flip-flopping around because blue zones are the ones that live a really long time, and they're able to live a long time because of the foods that they didn't previously eat, but no, wait, they're unhealthy because they weren't, like, I don't even know where he's going at this point.
And for those of you that are vegetarian or vegan and you love your kale, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kohlrabi, collards, you're eating cabbage. All of that stuff came from one plant. It is one plant that humans never ever had in their lives. We didn't evolve with it. We didn't grow up with it.
So he came for cabbage. What he's talking about is the Brassica family here. And this actually did get me interested. Like, when did Brassicas come into the fold? I don't think this matters, again, because if we can show that we were previously eating plants and we can show that plants are still healthy today, then what does it matter? We do have documentation of eating Brassicas quite a ways back from this paper. Sanskrit texts mention us eating them about 5,000 years ago, and coastally along Europe, we were eating them 8,000 years ago. And can we eat wild brassicas, or would those just immediately kill us? Well, it appears that from this study in Orkney in Scotland, they had evidence of sea kale consumption, which is a brassica, in dental plaque in a period before agriculture. And it's also worth mentioning that wild brassicas were around in the Fertile Crescent, so our ancestors likely ate those before agriculture as well.
How is it possible for a vegan to justify, or even a vegetarian to justify their food selection when it is an anti-human diet in that those plants never existed before?
Again, that's his main point, but I just have to say it doesn't matter the exact species of plant that we were eating in prehistory if we were still eating plants. They were still plants with plant cells, plant fibers, micronutrients, chlorophyll, all of these things that we're eating today. Yeah, maybe the carbohydrate content is higher now. But to really back it up, let's look at the fossil record, and thankfully we have fossilized dental plaques now to add to this. And looking to Neanderthals, human relatives, 36 to 46,000 years ago, yes, they were eating wild wheat, peas, barley, and rye, and various other foods. We literally have that in their tooth plaque. But maybe that's not far enough back. Humans have been around for hundreds of thousands of years. Well, we can look to this study. We were eating wild sorghum over 100,000 years ago. And as Science Daily summed that up, this is, quote, the oldest example of extensive reliance on cereals and root staples in the diet of early Homo sapiens more than 100,000 years ago. But it's been a few years since that has come out, and I found another paper that goes even further back that I have not mentioned, and that is this one, which found charred starchy tubers 120,000 years ago. And again, he is South African, and this was found in South Africa in the Classius River Cave. And as the study mentions, geneticists hypothesized that the duplication of starch digestion genes in early Homo sapiens approximately 300,000 years ago is an adaptive response to an increased starch diet. And that's wild because 300,000 years ago is, the most recent official date for Homo sapiens, anatomically modern humans, starting to exist. So that's key. And then we'll talk more about starch versus meat energy dynamics in a bit as he makes more claims, but I'll let him keep going.
One of the reasons that North American Indians never developed agriculture on a large scale is because there was just nothing damn well edible here in America, in North America.
So damn near nothing was edible. He then reads off the most ridiculously truncated, stunted list of foods that are plant-based in North America natively.
What plants and fruits that we currently eat come from North America? Well, the berries, blackberries, blueberries, cranberries, dewberries, gooseberries, grape, raspberry, and strawberries.
The three sisters are literally rolling in their graves right now. He does mention corn in a second, but I just have to say this is so either intellectually dishonest or he actually has no idea what he's talking about. I don't know. But yeah, North American indigenous people did have agriculture, around the same time that we did. They domesticated corn about 9,000 years ago. Those three sisters is corn, beans, and squash. I mean, corn, it's a big lump with knobs. It's got the juice, okay? But, throw farming aside, we're talking about before that, because domestication, again, not required to eat plants. And I have, this 1936 book that is just obliterating all of his claims here. It's What North American Indigenous People Ate. It's over 60 pages with about 20 foods on each page, the vast majority of which are native to North America, though not all were. I'll rattle some off. They ate fern fronds, coon palms, which are cycads with starchy roots, the American chestnut, yew berries, juniper berries, various pine nuts, cattail roots, burr reed tubers, arrow grass seeds, arrowhead/duck potato tubers, various grass seeds used for flour, and that's just a few pages in. Meadow garlic was one of the favorite foods of the Menominee tribe, along with a ton of others in the onion family. And we got hickory nuts, pecans, walnuts, mulberries, pokeberry, amaranth, barberries, gooseberries, currants, May apples, American plums, maple frickin' syrup, which of course he's completely ignoring. There's also the pawpaw, which is like one of my favorite fruits. It's native. It just doesn't work well with shipping, so you probably haven't had one. There's also grapes that are native, so they've got raisins, they've got persimmons. To shut this case, ironically, Native Americans ate Indian cabbage, which is of course a wild brassica. Not that his brassica claims even mattered, but there you go.
But the Central Americans had papaya, they had sapote, they had corn. Corn comes from Central America.
Wrong. Corn was domesticated in Mexico originally, and then, of course, it moved northward to the rest of North America. And this is where his logic gets even more confusing, because he's like, oh, well, in North America, they didn't have enough edible plants, but they also didn't have enough edible plants in Europe until they got North America's edible plants. I think you're getting to the point that all of that is nonsense, but then he kicks it way further back into, primate evolutionary history.
Way back, as a primate species, our intestine was developed so that we could handle cellulose, which ruminant cows can metabolize in their 4-chamber stomach, gorillas can metabolize in their colons. But we've lost that. Our colon can't do that, our stomach can't do that. We lost the ability to use plants as a primary source of nutrition.
Yes, humans, we just lost the ability to eat plants. That's why every major civilization is fueled by plants? I don't know. But in terms of the cellulose thing, he's talking about folivores, which is one adaptation that certain primates have, but the ones that we evolved from are largely frugivores. They are fruit eating, and that digestive system also happened to do quite well with starches that are cooked. Remember 300,000 years ago, our starch digestibility likely doubled, and then we didn't even come to Europe until about 40,000 years ago. So that's a big chunk of human history.
What did we eat? Well, we migrated out of the jungles and we started eating more and more animals. And our brains are mostly made of fat, cholesterol and fat, which had to come from marine animals for the most part, because those are the essential fatty acids.
And starches really fit the puzzle here. Looking to Karen Hardy, an archaeologist, and her team, they say that there are several reasons that starches were great for fueling our brain and helping humans evolve into what they are today. Our brain is really hungry for glucose. Starch is chains of glucose, and starch has a bunch of other advantages, like how it can be stored. It doesn't have a risk of giving us diseases like animal foods do. It's also a source of energy that isn't tapped by a lot of other animals. And this is where energy comes in, because cooking starch makes it digestible. That was our unique advantage. One good reason that we were able to break away from other animals in terms of intelligence, there's a reason, like I always say, that lions aren't the ones that are flying around plains despite being the apex predator. That would be way better than a monkey walking out of the forest at hunting down and eating meat. So he implies that we had to be eating animal fat in order to build our brain. And yes, our brain is about 60% fat, and it also has about 30 grams of cholesterol in it total. But as you know, the human body can make its own cholesterol. That's what the vast majority of our cholesterol is from anyway. And as for brain fat, our brain has about 800 grams of fat, which is about 7,200 calories worth of fat that we have like 16 years of adolescence to build up. And I should add that we can turn carbs into fat, so there's no reason that we need animal fat to do that. I would also add that plants have fat. I can't believe I need to explain some of this stuff, but clearly he doesn't know that. Anyway, there's also just the energy usage, which really puts things into perspective here, and that is that the human brain burns about 400 calories per day of glucose. That's like 12,000 calories per month, 146,000 calories per year, and we're talking about millions of calories of glucose burned, to reach 16 years old through adolescence, wherever you want to make that cutoff. So what's more important in growing a human, getting 7,000 calories of fat to structurally build the brain, or getting millions of calories to fuel the brain? And starch, again, being chains of glucose, is great at that.
So this bullshit by the vegans and the vegetarians that their diet is healthy is absolute hogwash.
It's amazing that he can just make these claims, and because he's a doctor, he doesn't need to cite anything. It appears people will believe him anyway, but I should just look at some research with you guys. First of all, vegans have a lower cancer rate from this meta-analysis by about 15%. They also have like 78% lower risk of total diabetes and 50 to 70% lower risk of hypertension. We can see a vegan diet opening up blood flow in arteries, like in studies by Esselstyn, and vegans average normal BMI unlike their meat-eating neighbors. And I should say that low-carb diets, like the ones that he is promoting, are associated from meta-analyses with about 30% increased all-cause mortality. I know I mentioned that like every video, but people don't seem to be getting the message. So while our ancestors certainly weren't ethical vegans on average, they were obviously eating a super plant-heavy diet to the point that we can thrive and be super healthy eating a vegan diet today. Now, those 100 grams of fiber per day poops did not come from only eating animals because we couldn't eat plants.
Designed for animals, for protein, for fat, for animal nutrients. That's why a ketogenic diet is the proper human diet.
Oh, that's why all these keto people need to rely on these artificial electrolyte drinks to like even keep from being dehydrated? No. Again, low carb diets increase all-cause mortality.
We design plants as a source of stability, not as a source of nutrition. They smell good, they taste good, they look good, they're easy to cultivate, easy to hybridize.
It's funny that he admits that like plants smell and taste good, like it's some like evil temptation. Well, guess what? We have carbohydrate receptors on our tongues, and those weren't designed to have us eat refined sugar. It's because there were foods like, of course, berries and starches and those whole carbohydrates that were good sources of energy and kept humans alive. In the end, denying the massive, huge role of plant consumption throughout human history and evolution is essentially clinically insane. And, I'm just going to go ahead and say that this guy should probably take his scrubs off because he has no idea what he's talking about. His claims are completely counter to all of the archaeological record and scientific evidence. I mean, yes, we have modern bred plants through agriculture, but plants still existed before that. Neanderthals have fossilized dental remains of wild barley, wild wheat, wild peas, and we've got, wild brassicas eaten throughout the world. We've got just pages and pages of these wild plants that were eaten by Native Americans. I'm sure similar documents exist for, everywhere else in the world, except for, again, the Inuits, who unfortunately weren't able to grow a large population. But perhaps most importantly, studies on eating plants today show, whether it's whole grains, vegetables, or fruits, that they're associated with decreased all-cause mortality. Clearly, they are healthy. His argument is wrong from all sides. Anyway, if you would like to try C's DS01 Daily Synbiotic, feel free to click the link below and use the code MIKE25 for 25% off your first month's supply at checkout. All right, and of course, let me know down below if there were any points I missed or anything that you want to add. And of course, feel free to like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.